Neil Abramson is kindly moderating, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, all the students who've done such hard work.
Stuff that you have to read. I have a series of questions here. I will preface some of the, I'll probably ask the question again at the end because I kind of want to tailor your responses to the extent by giving you some background on the question. Some of them are 1 minute questions because they're more specific. Some of them are 2 minutes, and I'll tell you. I understand we have our time over here. I don't have any one-word questions or answers because I find that the candidates don't answer those in 1 word anyway. So, and I find that they're very difficult to answer in 1 word. So why don't we get started? As you know, you don't really get an opening and closing, but I tailored the first question and hopefully the last to give you an opportunity to say something specifically about yourself. And the first one is this, which is, what made you decide to run for office? There's always a reason why somebody puts themselves out to run. And you having put yourself out, let me tell you thank you, because it's not easy. You should be commended just for putting yourself out to run. And I also want to thank all the family members and friends, but particularly family members, because it's harder on you than it is on them up here. For me, it was Hurricane Katrina. It was not a lifelong dream. It was Hurricane Katrina hit, and I decided to run. For you, what made you decide to run for state representative for District 98? We'll start here.
All right. Well, first of all, thank y'all for having us. My name is Abramson, and let me just say how wonderful it is to be home in this room that I spent so much time in here at Loyola Law. Frankly, it was my time here at Loyola Law, being able to work with students in the advocacy program, realizing that Louisiana is better than what it has become, realizing that Louisiana is better than what our legislature has made it out to be. In the most recent session, we've seen so many ability to work out our tax system because we don't want to, say that we're going to raise some taxes or something like that. I saw that there's a big problem. And I also saw that 2 of our wonderful legislators in this area will not be returning. So we're losing some significant institutional knowledge. I know that I started working at the state capitol whenever I was 17 years old, and I have institutional knowledge that I can bring to help this area, which is why I decided that I wanted to do this.
Thank you. I forgot to say 1 minute, but you did it perfect.
If I invented self-driving cars. If you're driving a recent car, your cruise control is me keeping you alive. The reason I'm running is I've been frustrated for a while about the fact that things are broken and responsible. And then you get it's been broken so long, why is it worth fixing it? And because it's the right thing to do. I don't have a leg to stand on if I'm not going to put myself out there. We don't have anyone up in Baton Rouge with the background in engineering, in statistics, in research. We don't have anyone with that finance degree who can put together a better way to structure our bonds to pay for the money we have. And I'm putting those skills on offer because the New Orleans delegation is a team, and we need a team with diverse skills.
Over here, because it's really hard for us to see the time when someone's off to the right, because it's happened in another forum, right? We've been doing this for a while together, so that would be awesome, because then we'll see, you'll get our line of vision. So, hi, I'm Amy Freeman, and I live in the district and have for 20 years, and I was inspired to put my name on the ballot because I'm just sick and tired of us being 50th on every damn thing. My husband Wes and I have raised 4 kids in this district. Our youngest child just started college. We have a daughter at LSU, a son at UNO, a daughter who's married and lives in Denver, and our youngest started college. Myself out there to run for office and bring my skills, my business skills. I'm a business strategist, so I'm not an attorney, but I know how businesses grow, and I work with every stage of a business, everything from an early stage startup to an international business. And my favorite part about Louisiana business is helping them grow so they can employ more people. So my skills are listening. I do a lot of listening with my clients. I've done a lot of listening in the neighborhood groups that I sit on. And I want to take those skills up to Baton Rouge and help bring our state forward where it needs to be.
Robbie?
We were the first Indian family in Terrebonne Parish, and we faced some discrimination while I was growing up, but and they lived the American dream for their family. My entry into politics, when you asked about that, was not a straight trajectory. My parents always kind of told me, keep your head down, study hard, and educate yourself, and don't worry about politics. That's kind of for the Americans, that's not for us. And that attitude was kind of what I carried forward through most of my life. I studied, grew up in Homa, but I went to Princeton for undergrad, came back to LSU for law school. And like Neil said, my real impetus to get involved was Hurricane Katrina. I'm clerk for Judge Stanley Duvall. So I look forward to the questions and I appreciate the time.
So why am I?
The question is, what made you decide to run for state representative in District 98?
Quite simply, I want to help people. That's what motivates me in my daily life. I'm looking for opportunities to lend a hand whenever I'm around people. And that's how I've spent the majority of my free time over the past few years. First, we've worked on launching Emerge Louisiana, which recruits and trains Democratic women to run for office, including the legislature. And then we also launched last May La Femme PAC, which provides capital application. I've been working with Kingsley House on their board of directors until I decided to run. I want to take that opportunity to the legislature, and my ability to help people there will grow exponentially once I'm elected. And so that's really what drives me. You know, I had some unique opportunities that I'll share with you in the closing. My childhood is somewhat unusual, and because of it, I've had some things that are very important to me that I want to make sure other people in Louisiana have those same opportunities.
Carlos?
Yeah, as far as for me, you know, I was at Landry and lobby the legislature for the city of New Orleans, and so I was always surrounded by people who were very engaged in making the community better. So as a public school graduate myself from Eleanor McMain, I wanted to do what I could. I went back to the schools. I was a public school teacher at Ben Franklin High School. All 6 of my kids went to New Orleans public schools as well. Then after Katrina, I was the founding board chair to reopen Audubon as Audubon Charter School. As a certified teacher, I was able to do that. I'm currently president of the board at Ben Franklin High School. I've been vice president of the board for the SPCA and negotiating the animal control contract with the city of New Orleans. I've started several boards for the state.
Thank you. The second question, Max, we're going to start with you, is a little bit more specific, but along the same lines as kind of why you decided to run. And I'll give you a little caveat, and I'll repeat the question at the end. But the question is going to be, what will be your first bill and why? We have a little tradition in the House. When your first bill comes up, you stand on the House floor and they put the sign on you that says first bill. But it's potentially one of your signature moments, your first bill that you file that you get to present on the House floor. So the question is, what will be your first bill and why?
My first bill will be a criminal justice reform bill. I want to change and fix the fact that we have coercive plea bargaining in this state. If you go in and the police arrest you, you have a higher likelihood of confessing to a crime than you would the problem they have when they charge people.
What will be your first bill and why?
Well, I'm pretty sure Neil and Walt will tell me this is a bad idea, but this is what my first bill will be. But we got to work on infrastructure dollars for New Orleans. So I'm going to work with the New Orleans delegation and our mayor to make sure my first bill is one that's co-authored with the New Orleans delegation, bringing the money back here. You know, sitting down with the tourism people and having them listen to the fact that they actually have some money that's held up that we need to be putting back to our streets and to the people. I'm going to do it. It's not going to be easy. But I'm frustrated by that. I sat on the Bureau of Governmental Research for 6 years. I know the numbers. I can tell you that there's money stocked away. There's all these cash reserves that really belong to us, the people who live in our houses, and not to tourism. So that'll be a really hard first bill. I don't think people will be laughing at me. It will not be for a license plate. And I'm sure the rest of the northern part of the state.
I think Amy is making a really good point about infrastructure dollars. I mean, when we go door to door, which we've done all summer long, it's always about infrastructure and quality of life issues. Just to be like what I thought about in just terms of roads and streets, I think there's been efforts before from the legislature to raise the gas tax. That can result in $1 billion of new revenue every year for our roads and streets and roads. So I think I would try to do that. I would try to raise the gas tax. Or, you know, kind of a modified sales tax on gasoline. People to bring in some infrastructure dollars. But I think Amy, I agree with Amy in terms of what the impetus of what the purpose of what we need to do here in the next session as the next legislator.
Kia, what would be your first bill and why?
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I feel like it's going. Anyway, so throughout this campaign, I've been writing writing my own weekly messages. And so I've got a lot of interviews with elected officials, with experts in coastal restoration, green infrastructure, and also sewage and water board issues. And I've really come to some discussions with elected officials who also think there's an opportunity for us to maybe file a constitutional amendment that would allow us to, as a local government, make our own decisions regarding fiscal policy and also our agenda. So we would make our own decisions regarding property taxes and what exemptions are granted across the board. That's totally done time, or is it a learning time? So there's no warnings here. Okay. That's what I was
Carlos, what would be your first bill and why?
Well, it probably goes back to my decision to run as the founding board chair at Audubon and the current president of the board at Ben Franklin, involved in school reform here in New Orleans. I've had to lobby the education committee quite a bit, and after a while I decided I'd rather be on the committee than always lobbying the committee. So people often have asked, why is Audubon so successful as an open admissions public school? Why are outcomes so high? And one easy answer, one component, it has pre-K3 and pre-K4 as part of its entire program. That's one reason it's so successful. So my first bill would be to go back to what Governor Blanco had begun with, which was to expand pre-K. School would start at age 4, then as we seek revenue and consensus, we would then move it down to age 3. Right now, there's a program called LA4, which pays for only about half of what it would cost to educate a child in 4-year-olds. It's not enough, so it ultimately stretch the budget like crazy. It's very difficult. If every child got age 4 and then age 3 education, it would solve all kinds of problems for educational outcomes, impact on poverty. That would be the first thing I would fight for.
So we know that unless there's a special session called, the session of 2020 is going to be a general session, which means that unfortunately you can't bring any bills relating to revenue or taxation or anything like that. So being constricted within those rules, I think my first bill would be something that a lot of people are very concerned about, which is redistricting reform. I have personally signed the Fair Districts Louisiana Pledge. That would make an independent commission that would write our first draft of our districts, because frankly, I do not believe that a partisan legislature can draw nonpartisan districts. And it doesn't make any sense to me why Monroe is in the same congressional district as the top of Tangipahoa Parish. And I don't think it makes sense to anybody else in this room either. So we need a separate group, an independent commission, to write the first draft of our districts to make sure that every vote counts in Louisiana.
The next question, and I'll give you 2 minutes for this. Since the last question was which bill would you file, and some of you mentioned something specific either to the state or locally, I'll ask and give you the flexibility to pick one or the other. The question is going to be, what is the biggest issue either in District 98 that you find to be the most critical thing right now, and what specifically will you do to address it as a state representative? And Amy will start with you this time. And we'll give you 2 minutes.
And you just want us to do one, because there's a few.
But you have 2 minutes. So.
Okay. Well, when I walk the district and talk to the people of the district, I'm a neighborhood person. My background is the neighborhoods. I've been on the Maple Area the Maple Area Residents Group for a while. We have a business group. So I hear a lot of people are worried about their safe action board, but we've been reformed. We've been under this criminal justice consent decree for a while now, and it's getting to the point where people can't do their jobs, and we're not actually helping the citizens feel safe in their own homes. Because I know people who've literally woken up 3 times within a month and had to replace their windows on their cars. So the bill that I might file in relationship to that would be make sure that the police have the technology that they need to be able to solve those crimes, because they are getting there with the technology, but they need more need. The highest level of crimes, we're doing better with that, but people need to be able to feel like they can walk to their car and feel safe with it, with their daily activities.
Thank you. Rodney, the question is, what is the biggest issue you're facing the district or the state? And what specifically in terms of legislation or other legislative actions did you take to try to solve?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking about what's going on in the state, with her interest group, and we talked about climate change, And I think that is one of the biggest issues facing the district and the state, is that we're South Louisiana, I'm from Terrebonne Parish, like I said, we're the first experienced people that have climate refugees in Ile-de-Jean-Charles, people that actually had to be moved and relocated because of climate change, rising sea levels. I wrote my thesis at Princeton on coastal restoration, something I'm really passionate about. I think that's something that goes part and parcel with climate change in terms of what we need to do. So if I was going to do something specifically, I know we've got $2.5 billion allocated to the BP oil settlement towards coastal restoration. I think what I would like to see as a legislator is a community-based approach to implementation and use of those dollars, and using more sediment diversions, and going into the communities that are along the coast and trying to negotiate some of those interests that exist, like the seafood and fisheries and oil and gas even, and trying to implement those dollars.
I think the most important issue is for the city of New Orleans, which is our infrastructure and our drainage and our pump situation. It's going to cost several billions of dollars. Last night I heard the first kind of roundabout figure of $7 to $8 billion. So we're going to need everyone, all hands on deck at the legislature, doing what Representative Abramson did, Walter Jay, Jimmy Harris did last session, creating recurring revenue. But in addition to that, since I already answered that question, I'm going to move on to what I think the largest issue for our state is, and that is, I agree with our people, our way of life, and our economy depends on our coastline. So we have the largest network of ports in the world, and so the ports, the energy, oil and gas, they all depend on our coastline. And so for us, that's our #1 priority. And so I want to be on House appropriations. And then if I am, I will sit on the joint committee for budget, which then can allocate surplus funds to the coastal trust fund. So that's what I want to do. I want to be advocating for more money in addition to federal dollars.
Starting with education, as many of us have talked about, early childhood would be a good start to having a good beginning in life, and then follow that through. So education reform is part of it. Also then tax reform. If we think about the way that we tax ourselves in the state, there's a disproportionate burden on working families that we see statewide. We need to have less of a sales tax, maybe something more like the Stelly plan, which was once our consensus, or maybe there's a little bit more for top earners with households like $50, which was enough to avoid that $1 billion hole which was put in the budget when it was thrown out. Then we also see that for example, the way that we tax businesses with the tax exemptions that we see for large corporations with their infrastructural improvements that don't really add jobs. So we work on tax reform. We could increase the earned income tax credit. We could do it in ways that would support working families so that they have a better leg up. Then also criminal justice reform is an extremely important part of this in terms of stopping the cycle of poverty in a way in which money bail, as has been described, impacts people disproportionately. The poor, funding the courts off of fines and fees is a difficult situation as well. Raising the minimum wage would also be another important one. What we're looking for is people to have quality, access to quality, affordable health care, good education, a fair shot in the criminal justice system, a living wage. All these things would add to improving the situation and get us off of the bottom of every list.
So as usual, Carlos steals my thunder when I say something like that. I was also going to say poverty. I mean, Loyola is a Jesuit school in the tradition of social justice. We understand things like, we need to make sure that we're monitoring the formerly incarcerated. I don't appreciate that at all. I think we need to recognize that the problem with crime, the problem with test scores that aren't where they need to be, it all goes back to poverty. I agree with much of Carlos says, and I thank our delegation who pushed things like raising the earned income tax credit. We're trying to raise the minimum wage. When I walk the district, I make a point to stop. If I see developments, I want to go talk to that person that's been there for 50 years. I want to ask them what their problems are and what keeps them up at night. What keeps them up at night is they can't afford to stay there anymore because their neighborhood is being gentrified. And I recognize I contribute to the problem. I have the self-awareness to realize that I am also a gentrifier. How do we help these people stay in their home whenever they are caught in the cycle of poverty? We can make sure that they can afford their taxes by increasing the homestead exemption, by making sure that there's a freeze on the amount that their property can increase, or put a cap on the percentage that their property taxes can increase. We can make sure that they have homeowners insurance and flood insurance by making these two things tax deductible. But we can also do a lot of other things to make sure that we treat poverty as an issue that it really is, so that we give people the tools to bring themselves out of it and don't treat it as a pre-existing condition.
Max, what's the biggest issue in District 98 of the state, and what specifically would you do about it?
So a lot of the statewide issues we've just talked about are big and complex, and they're intertwined, so it's hard to pick one. Let me talk about the district in particular. When I go door knocking, people in the district usually say they're concerned about the flooding in the roads. Some of them are concerned about education, and the rest are concerned about that they don't feel safe, or that they don't feel like the economy is working for them, and somebody they know had to move to Houston because they couldn't afford to stay here. So let's talk about the roads and the infrastructure, since I think that's the most pressing. Nobody's gonna move here to work if they can't afford car insurance, if their house floods every day. Everyone wants to say that every problem can be solved if we create a new funding source, if we increase the money spent on it. But two broken roads don't make a good road. We need to sit down and go through systematically and figure out how can we make the process better so that it produces better results. And I'll give you a good example. The state's bidding law, where if the city of New Orleans is gonna put out a bid for a road, it is extremely formalistic. It's very restrictive. Mayor of the city's budget out of Baton Rouge. We have to change the system so that we put an end to all of the preemption. Like her or hate her, Mayor Cantrell won that election. She deserves to govern here, and that's why I signed the Fair Share Pledge.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna now have an infrastructure question and a budget question, because that's the nature of a lot of discussion. It's gonna be warped by 12 years of what I've been through up in Baton Rouge, so I'm gonna give you some background when I ask the question. The question is gonna be, we all know that we have a statewide infrastructure problem, and we have a local infrastructure problem. The question is, what are we gonna do to fix it? Before I ask you that, let me preface it with this. The gas tax is a proposed solution for infrastructure. The gas tax goes to state roads and bridges. In District 98, we are last in the entire state in terms of state roads and bridges. We're 105 bridges. And the 4 miles is Claiborne, which has been recently redone. So I want to start off with the question is, no question that the state has a backlog of infrastructure issues, and the gas tax is an option. Since your constituents will be paying it, we will not see any of that money coming to actually District 98 to fix any of their infrastructure. A, would you support a gas tax? And if so, why? Or
Well, I started out.
It'll be 2 minutes, because I realize it's a state portion and a local.
Yeah, I started out by saying I do favor a gas tax. It's an important issue for the state. It's an important issue for our infrastructure. I mean, it's there's apparently like a $60 billion backlog in infrastructure projects throughout the state. New Orleans, while it's the center, we need to have the surrounding communities actually doing well in addition. So in terms of the fiscal picture, I think you're bringing up a really good point, is that, exempt certain industries and folks from paying their taxes or paying property taxes in the state, and that could be a source of revenue to fund some of our roads and no bridges but roads and stuff like that. And then I think, just generally speaking, you've got to look at, there was an opportunity in the last one of the special sessions to actually look at an income tax, the excess itemized that was lost by 4 votes. If you looked at what was happening during one of those special sessions, and allocations or appropriations to our district to fix our roads and stuff like that. I mean, what's interesting is that, like, you saw, if you walk the district, you look at Cherokee, for example, like it's in the Black Pearl. It's like a wonderful road, and then some of the other roads that are just adjacent to it are just completely terrible. So, I mean, for some reason, I think we do lack the revenue, but sometimes there's a lack of will in our district, from the,
And it makes businesses very leery about moving here, in addition to our other local infrastructure issues that we're having. So I would absolutely support an incremental increase of the gas tax as proposed by the bipartisan group last year. Gas is probably as cheap as it's been in a very long time, and so if there's ever a time to do it, I think the time is now. And then more locally, I go back to my first answer, where I discussed a constitutional amendment that would allow us to make discussion right now. 60% of New Orleans is not paying their property taxes. And so we really have to have a very honest discussion about, 40% of us are paying 100% of all the property taxes, and we're funding all of the services. And so for me, if we pass that constitutional amendment that allows New Orleans to make those decisions, and decentralize the state government and have that more local control, I think we'll be able to make our own infrastructure decisions, and we won't have to go to Baton Rouge every time we need help and they, like a parent almost. So.
Carlos, would you support youth on infrastructure?
I definitely support the gas tax. And as far as the question as to the gas tax benefiting other parishes of the state, but maybe not as direct of an impact for us, then that's an opportunity for us to go to other legislators and say, I'm perfectly ready to do something that's not going to benefit my parish because I know it's important for the entire state. When I come to you asking for something from my parish, I hope you'll listen to me and look at what we all need, as far as showing you can work with everybody. I grew up in the public schools, and this kind of deferred maintenance is pretty emblematic of things that we just don't do right here in Louisiana. We don't make the proper investments, and then we end up with problems later on. It's penny wise, pound foolish. So we must make those investments now. As Kia said, to attract business, this becomes a business development issue as well as a safety issue, and as far as long-term health of the state. Now, as far as locally, this is a perfect example of where the industrial tax exemption goes wrong, where I believe it's Cameron Parish has some of the most voluminous industrial infrastructure using, like the Governor Edwards provided, with the local lot for our local revenue, which could be put in infrastructure. Then also with that, looking at other ways we could do it. And yes, there's a lot of talk about property taxes and how to deal with that. I ran a small nonprofit, New Orleans Creative Glass Institute, and I did stay awake at night wondering if equipment failure was going to put us out of business. So I know that there are small nonprofits doing very important work in a city like ours that we don't want to damage, but there are also large nonprofits that have for-profit type enterprises competing with people who are in business. We need to take a hard look at them paying their fair share. That'd be another way to get money for infrastructure locally.
Now would you address state infrastructure and local?
So the state question as it relates to the gas tax, and this is my only hesitance, is that a gas tax as well as other sales-related taxes are inherently regressive. And we have to think about the fact that the single mom who has 3 jobs, who only can use her car, that's the only way that you can get around. Because as someone who previously rode RTA, it's not very reliable, frankly. And so we have to consider that as well. What I would prefer that we do is that we take a look seriously at our tax credit structure. A graphic that shows how much Louisiana actually gives away in its tax revenue, and we're second only to New York, and yet we have like a fourth of the population. So my recommendation first would be that we, and this is not going to be very politically popular, but you sunset every single tax credit and tax exemption every 4 years, and make these special interest groups come back to the legislature and actually prove that what they're saying that they're doing is actually having the effect that they're claiming. So that's how I would address the state issue. Now on the local issue, I have said multiple times I am in favor of abolishing the Board of Commerce and Industry, because it does not make sense to me why an unelected state board should be able to decide whether a locality or a municipality can get its property taxes or not. We went to a wonderful briefing at the Super Region that talked about how Texas does their industrial tax exemption program. And each municipality or each county or however it does, it has a group that makes that decision. I think that there are ways we can go forward to make sure that we're not robbing our municipalities of the kind of dollars that they need for infrastructure and stuff like that. But I also think as I've been learning going through this process about the nonprofit issue as well. That's something we definitely need to look at, but we can't take a machete to it, we have to take a scalpel, because there are some nonprofits that operate on a shoestring budget that do really good work in our city.
I have to say before we actually start, y'all are an awesome panel, because when she takes down, the time she takes down, y'all actually stop.
So, you have a problem with an agency, and it also means look out for y'all's interests. So, as long as the system is like it is, where we're taking money from this parish and that parish and sending it as a gas tax, y'all are getting the funding from other areas of the state where we need the funding, and these other parishes are paying different taxes. In the long run, we have to fix this whole situation. We can't have a dozen different taxes on 3 dozen different things, because nobody can figure out what they're paying and where that money is going. And that is a threat to the democracy of the state, because you can't keep us accountable if you don't know what you're paying and what you're getting. And that means ultimately we have to get rid of the sales tax. We can replace it with a net cash flow tax, like a lot of other places have. That combines a VAT, it combines a corporate tax, it combines a payroll tax, all in one, very simple, saves money in terms of the companies. On the income tax side, we have to have a progressive income tax. The simplest way to do that is to have a single rate, single deduction system. It's worked everywhere else in the world, it works across the country, and if we have that with that broad tax base, your taxes will be lower overall, and you will still get better service because everyone will be paying their fair share.
Have rolling around, but it's fun to be with them because we've been together quite a bit over the past few weeks. We need to have the gas tax because I know how bad the infrastructure is for the state. So just because we only have 4 miles of state road, we have a lot of business owners in District 98. Some of them are clients of mine, and they're having struggles with how they're getting things with their trucking and their different units done because of the roads. It's one of the reasons that they're, as commercial people, their taxes are so high on their, I kind of think of insurance as a regressive tax, but anyway, so their insurance rates are so high on the commercial side, we know how they are. And it eats out of your budget. So if you're on a tight budget, maybe the gas tax isn't exactly the way, but for now it's a good start. And for getting the infrastructure dollars here to 98, I agree with Carlos. I mean, it's a negotiating piece for how you can negotiate with other legislators, which we're going to need to do, and that's what I plan to do when I get to Baton Rouge.
Okay, now I have a budget question. It's going to be a 30-second question, and then I'm going to follow up with a minute question, and I'm going to basically get the last 4 years of history. So as chairman of Ways and Means, even though we have no legislative historian, which we should, I feel very confident that over the last 3 years and 10 sessions, including 7 special sessions, that we in Ways and Means went through more bills than any particular committee in one term in the history of the legislature. And so we did all that. And at the end of the day, we ended up originally to cover a $2 billion bill, a pretty cool bill, but that particular bill and the current surplus, if it exists today, who knows if things will change, are roughly even. The first question is going to be, do you support keeping the 0.45 now, or would you move to get rid of it, create a wash, or may continue to keep a surplus going forward? And then, of course, it will expire in 2025. So will you vote in 2025 to keep it going? So why? I'm going to come back and ask you next if you're not for the 0.45 or what other ideas you have, so you don't have to go into that now. That'll be the follow-up question. So the first question is, are you in favor of keeping the
Governor John Bell took office, and so I think we need to look at how we're going to use that surplus to bring us back to levels where we were before, particularly with higher education funding. My parents were young hippies, and so I went to public school my entire life, and I also went to public higher learning institutions, and so I want to make sure other people have those opportunities. So that's the end of that one.
And that's good. You mentioned some of the things that actually I was going to mention. There's
less regressive option to get us to a consensus for something that will be steady, stable, long term.
So I say we keep it only if we cannot find a more progressive alternative in the short term. I agree, it's terrible that we balance our budget on the back of the poor repeatedly, but as I understand, we get the number of votes that it needed. So yes, if we cannot have a more progressive alternative, keep it for now and try to work for something better.
So one of the issues we have in the state is our revenue is cyclical because it's tied to the oil and gas industry, and nobody in Baton Rouge bothers to go out and buy insurance on that cyclicality. You can do it, you can call up an investment bank in New York, they'll sell it to you. My concern is the way they estimate that dollar figure. If we take the sales tax away, we might end up with a shortfall and then we have to cut stuff. But if it actually manifests, I would be in favor of getting rid of it as long as we're not cutting critical services.
I'll say that I think we should keep it for now.
Yeah, I would say keep it for now. I agree with what Evan said in terms of its regressive nature. And if there would be an opportunity to do something short term, which I doubt, I would be more in favor of that, but keep it.
The follow-up, because it sounds like the consensus is to try to do something different in the future at some point in time. Again, with either the baggage or the knowledge, I'm not sure what I call it, that I inherited. We tried over the last 4 years to do something different than the sales tax. The one penny was put in place temporarily so we could try to make another go at doing something. The 0.45 again was after individual bills on specific topics, and sometimes they were comprehensive bills on an entire subject matter. And yet we ended up with the sales tax. So the hard question is, what would you do differently, and how do you expect to have a different result?
My wife is going to kill me for having done this if I win. It's scary to think about the knots we could get in if the wrong coalition ends up controlling the debate. So it'll be critical for us to look for consensus. I would advocate returning to something like the Stelly plan as a way to start. I know you all had trouble getting it done. We'll start again and see what we can do.
Evan, what would you do differently, and why would you think you have a different result?
Yeah, so y'all did a hell of a job, I'll tell you what, and to watch the, but look, so I think it starts from the organizational session. We will all be members of a Democratic caucus because I don't think any of us are Republicans, at least not on the ballot. And so I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to make sure that we get together and as a caucus unite behind a speaker candidate who is going to be reasonable and who is going to appoint a Ways and Means Committee that is going to be looking for an actual compromise and not the gang of no, as a certain group of people started with. And so when you begin with the idea that if we put the Democratic caucus's force behind a speaker candidate who is going to get the problems done, then you get a committee that you can bring together, then you get a bunch of problem solvers that you can start working together and look at all of these options and find something that people are going to agree on and that is going to work.
So part of the issue with striking the compromise is that we got into this situation because there's a lot of reasonable situations where under the formula for our income tax or the formula for our property tax, you get an unfair. These are my numbers on my books. It's not a fair outcome. Fix it. We got one exemption. We got another exemption. We got a third exemption. And now we have the tax system shot through with holes. That's why earlier I was talking about changing the formula, changing the way it's collected so that you don't have these problems. These are, a net cash flow tax, a land value tax instead of a property tax. These are things economists sat down and designed because you don't need to go through and have these deductions in order to avoid all of these problems. And I think if we start with, let's change the formula in a way that will get a good result, rather than trying to beat heads over how to change specifics, we'll get a better outcome.
And I agree, and saying that y'all getting this done was huge. I don't know how you did it, but I'm glad you did get it done. I actually agree with Max that we've got to look at these, of the formula of how we're doing it. I'm a business person. I like to solve problems. I love to study numbers. So I'm a problem solver. That's just my nature. So taking the time to sit with where their interests are and how to move things forward. And so I think it's gonna be really hard because the Republicans like this, that this is their way. And I would work really hard to find a compromise that they would sign off on.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are touching upon the sentiment that's actually really out there, that we're not really gonna know until we get there what we can do and accomplish. And I think that's an important point that everybody has made here, that like we all try to build coalitions, we all try to we try to be bridge builders in a sense, and I don't think there's really a distinction amongst us about who can do that better. Because there's going to be such turnover in the legislature. I mean, you built, you were chairs of Ways and Means, and you got that to that place by compromise or by like talking and having relationships with people. I think that's sort of what everybody should, we should try to do. And Walt does the same thing. It's kind of work. I mean, I would also philosophically just say I would like to see something that's more progressive. So just.
So, I mean, obviously I'm not a miracle worker either, and so, but I have a plan, and I'd like to see us pull our sales tax back in line with what is the norm around the country. And then I think we need to reform our state tax. So we have a perception issue around the state that we have high tax here, when at the end, the amount we actually collect is relatively low. We're to work on that once I'm there, and I'm very hopeful with the number of women who are running right now.
And I can tell you, you got honest answers, and there were no brownie points trying to make with the moderator, because nobody said state constitutional convention. Final question. 1 minute. Might be the hardest question of the night. All great folks up here with great backgrounds, running for the right reason, with great ideas. But people out here in the people District 98 can only vote for one of you. Why should someone in District 98 vote for you? I think we're back here for that.
Back to me. All right, cool. No pressure. I am 33 years old. I've lived 11 of those 33 years here in New Orleans. I started working at the Louisiana legislature when I was 17 years old. I am a student of the process. I revere the place. And I understand what it's gonna take in order to get some stuff done. I am a policy nerd. I can sit down and talk about things all day. I want to help people. I've seen a lot of different parts of the state. I grew up in Pierre Park, Louisiana. I grew up in a very conservative place. I know the way that people think. I know how to talk to people who are not from New Orleans and how to bring them in with, some gumbo or some jambalaya and, some Boudreaux and Thibodeau jokes. Got a ton of them. But also, I think it's important to tell all of you that I am running also to make history, because I would like to be the first openly gay member of the Louisiana legislature. Because we have had too many times whenever our legislature does not recognize the rights of minorities. It's time to stand up to that. That's why you should pick me.
Max?
So, when I was in middle school, I was trying to save enough money for a PlayStation. I went and I worked in a warehouse in the summer. It was hot, it was sweaty, and I loaded up orders. And I actually put an order in the wrong truck, accidentally. I stayed late, and I worked overtime. And I got that order to the customer. I drove 70 miles to do it. I apologized in person. I showed up. I never put an order on the wrong truck again. There are a lot of people up in Baton Rouge who disappear for 4 years, and you only hear about them during elections. There are a lot of people who don't fix mistakes that get made. There are a lot of people who don't come and listen to your problems. I'm running because I want to change that. We need to change I don't think anyone in this room is happy with the way business gets done up in Baton Rouge, and we need people with a different perspective and a different attitude. I have a history of working with people on a business level in the northern part of the state. I know who to go up to and talk up there to get things done, and I'm gonna get them done for you.
So why should people vote for me? With some great candidates up here, I absolutely agree. I'm Amy Freeman. I've lived in this district for more than 20 years, so I really understand what's going on in this district. My husband and I have raised 4 kids here. I'm a strategic business consultant, love solving problems. We got a lot of problems in Baton Rouge. Vote for me because you want someone who's gonna solve problems, who's gonna work across making my neighborhood strengthen and get people together in our neighborhood. So I ask you to vote for me on October 12th. I'm number 122 on the ballot.
Robbie?
So I started telling you about my immigrant experience and my family, and I'll dovetail it with this conversation. We told our daughter Lolly, who's 5 years old, like, we have to treat everybody equally. You can't judge a person by the color of their skin. And she said, well, you should judge me by the color of my skin because I have beautiful brown skin. And it's really a voice. That's what I lived that life, that experience, and that's what I want to be as your next state representative, to be that voice for folks that, you know, the mother who, you know, has to go to a minimum wage job after 2 weeks of giving birth because she can't afford to live, like, take medical leave. So, in any event, I'm Ravi Sanjasetti. I appreciate the time. It was really wonderful to be here. Thank you so much.
As I mentioned, my parents were musicians and had a very working class upbringing in Lafayette and affordable public universities. And then there were still good paying job opportunities when I graduated from college. And so I'm running because I want to make sure other people have those same opportunities that provide for upward mobility. And also I'm a trained advocate. I'm a lawyer in my profession. And so that, in addition to the fact that I'm a woman, which have been proven to bring home more money to their districts, I think I'm the best suited for this job and the best person to represent New Orleans and Louisiana. And so I invite you to vote for me on October 12th.
Thank you. Carlos?
Yeah, I've lived in and around the district my whole life, and I come to you with a proven record of leadership and education in the cultural communities. I was the founding board chair of Audubon after Katrina. It was a very difficult process to rebuild the school. I brought together a very diverse group of people. We were the very first school opened after the storm on the East Bank. Similarly, there was a community of some 40 glass artists living in New Orleans. All of our studios were destroyed. Myself and 2 other artists, we formed an organization, got grants from the Ford Foundation and others, built a state-of-the-art glass studio in Mid-City. We were the first thing open in Mid-City. It was us and the boats in a ghost town, and we had that furnace rolling and saved that piece of the cultural